rests.
Counting careless in the sky. What a thrilling time to be alive.
What is up, everybody? It's the Georgia Show. It's Thursday, February 15th. I'm Jake Rowe. Hope you had a great Valentine's Day. He's Rusty Mansell. I know he had a great Valentine's Day. This is he bought gifts like an alpha male. Probably bought them. Probably got up before daylight on Valentine's Day and went and got the gifts.
I went actually. My volume sound okay?
Yeah, that sound fine to me.
Okay, making sure. I'm getting some feedback on YouTube comments. No, I actually know. You know, Christmas Eve is an alpha male shopping day. That's when like the elite of elite go shopping. But you don't mess around on Valentine's Day. So I went ahead and went Monday.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's.
I mean, you can't rub it in another man's face every holiday. But Christmas Eve is when you really just say you separate the men from the boys, and everybody that goes out on Christmas Eve and gets their shopping. I appreciate you for being around.
Absolutely. I don't even know if we didn't even get gifts this year. I think I got my wife a dog. We paid for a dog here a couple weeks ago. So
like I tell my daughters, I pay for that cell phone and that car insurance. You get Valentine's. You get Valentine's at the first of every month. The 8-year-old, she gets something, but them older ones, they get Valentine's 12 times a year. This is expensive in Daddy's pocketbook.
That's right. So today, Rusty, we got 2 Georgia support staffers leaving the program. We're going to talk about that and kind of what goes into maybe filling those spots. We're going to talk about Under Armour camp coming up. We got the list of prospects yesterday, and we're going to get a chance to see those guys, talk to those guys. There's some other guys that they're expected to be there that I'm really interested to get a look at. We're going in force, man. We got me, you, Rusty, you, Jeremy, and Roos going to that thing. So we're pretty excited about going and getting to cover it and having some content for you. And then we're going to continue our look ahead to Georgia's schedule with the one a lot of folks are excited about, a trip to Austin, Texas to take on the Longhorns, Darrell K. Royal Stadium. Going to get some barbecue, maybe go see a comedy show at the mothership. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Boy, that is.
Maybe change a tire. Maybe change a tire at F1. Get on a pit crew.
It's going to be very interesting how all that plays out. You know how this thing has went out with this F1, and I know talking to some people kind of that helped plan the trips for Georgia on this deal. It is going to be interesting because Austin is not. It's a major, pretty big city, but that might be the biggest weekend they've had in a long, long time. And there's some real concerns on traffic and how things are going to happen. And, I know Georgia fans are excited, and Georgia fans are going. I don't give a damn where they're staying. If they're having to camp out in the Walmart parking lot, they're freaking going. But it's going to be interesting because it is going to be busting at the seams in Austin, Texas for this game.
We'll get into it later on. We'll get into the game. I'll be interested to hear after it's all over how it compares to like South by Southwest and things like that, the festivals and stuff they have there every year. Because South by Southwest, I mean, my wife and I were talking about going 2 or 3 years ago, and I didn't really realize how massive of an event that is for them there. But listen, man, you're going to bring a couple 100,000 people to town for just Georgia, Texas. And then, you got the F1 race. I don't know how many people that brings to town because I'm not really an F1 guy, but I'm sure, that's an international sport. So it's going to bring a lot of people around too. But let's dig into these. Let's dig into a couple of resignations for Georgia yesterday. Scott Cochran and Darrell Dickey. The Cochran one kind of came out of nowhere for me a little bit. Didn't know, what's going on there. Georgia announces he's, resigning to seek other opportunities. Darrell Dickey's not a surprise because there's a high turnover rate right there. And as far as I know, Brandon Streeter's still around.
Yes, he is.
But you're talking about, Darrell Dickey, an offensive coordinator there. I'm sure, Kirby will be reaching out to try and find a really good replacement for that guy. That guy's really attractive. That job's really attractive. But Scott Cochran, man, moving on, 8 national championship rings for that man.
Yeah. and you look at it, and really, Anthony Dasher of Rivals broke that story yesterday.
Good job by Dash.
And you look at that, and so the last kind of known that he was in the office last Tuesday, or cleaning out his office on Tuesday, maybe. So if he's leaving to go anywhere else, or if he's leaving just to get out of football, which he very well could be, you know, he has a son who's in high school. He's a son who's a sophomore linebacker, DB, plays high school football. I've been around him a couple of times. He has a younger daughter, I believe, too. So you never know what's going on there, but he at least he finished out. You know, he worked through that spring and that winter evaluation and visit OVs and those types of things. So, you know, you look at Scott Cochran. I'm sure we'll hear down the line if you know what's next for him. But you're talking about when you go into somebody's living room and you sit there and you look at that little case, and you start looking at rings. Man, I don't know if anybody in the country can have a display on a coffee table like Scott Cochran can. Kirby Smart, I guess.
Yeah, close to it, almost.
Kirby Smart and Scott Cochran, I mean, they had so many. You know, something that never really gets out, and I might get in trouble for saying this. It's not a huge deal, but you know, like Derrick Henry and those guys and Julio were so close to Scott Cochran. You know, they would come over to Athens sometimes and work out with him in the off season. You know, they're damn sure not going to put that out anywhere because they're Bama guys, but they're also Scott Cochran guys, and they would come over and work out some with him in the off season, indoor, and you know, from time to time do some drills and stuff like that. But yeah, you know, regardless of what he does next, kind of caught us all a little bit off guard, but that's the way those things happen. You know what I mean? You know, that's just the way those things happen sometimes. And, you know, best of luck to him and whatever his next thing is. I do think Daryl Dickey will end up somewhere pretty quick as a former OC, probably comes over, spends a year, tries to see what George is doing, tries to see what, you know, he can learn from this thing and, you know, being around players, those types of things, and you go somewhere else.
Yeah, looking at Cochran, I may have that number wrong. It may be 7, because I know that they had this. Him and Kirby had not all of them, but you know, I think Kirby won like what was it, 4 at Alabama or 3 at Alabama, you know, and then Cochran was around for the 17 national championship. Kirby was obviously in Athens on the other sideline for that one. Cochran got 1 at LSU that Kirby didn't get, but 2 at Georgia. You know, a few there at Alabama, and then 1 at LSU. And he did that in a span, Rusty, of if it's 7, it was 7 in 21 years. So every 3 years, the man's getting some new jewelry to do that. And that's really impressive. And honestly, man, I've always, and I know why, but it's still surprising. I'm surprised at some of these coaches that do have 15, 20, 25-year careers where they average making, you know, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. I'm surprised at the number of people that don't walk away just into the sunset. A lot of these guys coach until they're much older. They put 30, 40 years into the business. I know why they don't do it. It's because they're wired to compete. They're wired to get after it. It's become kind of, you know, there's a reason that there are a lot of smart people out there. There are a lot of smart people that don't do what they do because it's not in them. They don't love it like, you know, you need to love it and the grind and all that stuff. But I am surprised that you don't see more people kind of do like what Bob Stoops did. Like Bob Stoops put a long time in it, but Bob at an age where he was able to kind of move on and still do some stuff, didn't move on and do some stuff. He hung it up and it was over. And I know why, but to me, it's still a little bit surprising we don't see a little bit more of it.
It's life, man. You get accustomed to your family gets accustomed to living a certain lifestyle. And, you know, let's face it, you put a couple kids in private school and, you know, those types of things, and life, I don't care how much you make, it gets expensive, and anything in the world today is expensive. So, you know, it's one of those deals. But I think the root of that is those guys you get into college and you're wired like that. And, you know, you work at Alabama and then you work at you work at Georgia or Kirby Smart. You're kind of like a machine, man. You know what to expect every day. You know what's expected of you. You know what, you know, this time of year is, what's coming up, what's expected of you this summer. You know, it's those guys just wired different. And I've said it a couple of times. I mean, I'm not in a bragging way. I made the decision not to take a job, and it was not at Georgia. So I made a decision not to take a job at a Power 5 school because I didn't think that it would be healthy for my family and for me. And if you'd have told me 10, 12 years ago I had an opportunity, I would have thought, oh my God, I'm jumping at that. But when you sit down and look at the requirements, and this was a couple of years ago, Jake, this is a totally different world now. When you start going into recruiting, I think one day when we can sit down with Barton Simmons, a close friend of ours that left our business and went to work with one of his high school best friends and high school teammates and Clark Lee at Vanderbilt. When we can really one day sit down with Barton and say, Barton, what was it like behind the scenes? It's going to be a great interview and a great podcast with him. But man, it's a different world now. It's no joke. And you have to fully commit regardless of that money, man. It is a lifestyle change, and everybody in your household has to kind of be on board that dad's going to miss a lot and dad's going to be elsewhere a lot of time.
You're a lot more likable than me. I think my family would be like, hey, does that mean you're not going to be around more? Yeah, go ahead. Go do it. My 8-year-old daughter would lose her mind. I think everybody else take me or leave me. But that's just kind of the way we are around here. But no, you're right. I mean, it is. And listen, they get used to, not only do they get used to, and it's not just the coach, it's the family. Sorry, I had something fall off my counter here. My dog's over here just pulling stuff around. They get used to the travel and seeing the world, and the family gets used to being part of the program and being part of a family. And because that's something that they do. Obviously, Andrew Smart, sideline fixture,
growing up in the locker room.
Yeah, growing up in a locker room. I mean, what a hell of a way to grow up and to be around, things like that. Yeah, you've probably got some attention on you that a 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old kid would never have. We've seen that on display.
He survived his 1-game suspension.
He did.
Got back in the game.
Yeah, he got shut down from the PS5 probably all week too. But there's a lot that goes into. I'm just surprised we don't see more guys be like, all right, I've made my money and I'm gone.
You know what Kirby Smart does on Sunday night? He has family night, and so they meet. The coaches meet. I think Sunday's their long day, so they meet all. This is game during the season. They get in right after church. If you go to church, some of them get in first thing Sunday morning, but you get in right after church. They go from like 12:30 to like 6, and then in the indoor, they do dinner. And it's like your family, your little kids, and they have the round tables, and everybody sits around and has dinner, and the kids run around and play, and you get about an hour and a half to where everybody, the families are together. And, Georgia's certainly not the only one, but that's kind of something that I know they do. And then also on Wednesday nights, Kirby makes the coaches go home after practice, and you can do all your recruiting calls, but you can do them from home. And, that's the big thing. I know Mark Rick would never start his meetings until 8:30. He wanted you to take your kids to school. So, there's different things to steal minutes. Like I call it stealing minutes with your kids, but man, you have to do those things or it's just not. And then, we could get way off subject here, but this is just different world in recruiting. But at the end of the day, man, those are jobs that are very, very high paying, and, you're able to afford, different financial, living with those things. A lot of pressure comes with it, but on the financial side, I see why some guys never walk away from it, because they continue to build and build and build. And you look at Will Muschamp. He's taken a step away, but he's also had 2 buyouts, and from 2 different SEC jobs. He made a lot of money over the years, and he's got a young kid that's going to be, his young son's going to be enrolling in Vanderbilt in the summer, and he's going to be around the program during the week. And from my understanding, he's going to be, if his son's playing at Vanderbilt, he's going to be watching his son, which I 100% agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And best of luck to 2 guys that have been around the coaching profession for a long time and have great reputations. Like you said, Derrick Henry and those guys coming to work with Coach Cochran and some of the things that he did. And obviously he stepped away from Georgia for the personal reasons way back when, and has been open about kind of his issues there on social media. And Daryl Dickey's another guy. I remember when Georgia hired him, I started asking around, but it's like, hey, he's coached everything, he's been everywhere, and everybody loves this guy. Like, he's just kind of a good old boy, Texan, and folks like him a lot. All right, Rusty. Under Armour camp coming up this week. Under Armour next. They get a whole weekend of it. They got some young guys on Friday and Saturday, and then they bring in kind of the guys that we're there to see on Sunday. We kind of got the list yesterday. We're not going to go through that big list and talk about all of that, but anybody that you know that's going to be there that you're really excited to get to see in person, maybe some. I mean, you've seen most of them in person already, but maybe not in this setting.
What's the running back from Alabama? Is it Alvin Henderson?
Alvin Henderson, yeah.
Like, I like to see the running backs, and it's really, you just want to see how, if they got ball skills. A couple years ago, there was a running back that I was really high on. I mean, I was really high on, and coaches can't come. Now, coaches can come if your son is a prospect, if your son is there. So I remember Dale McGee, whose son just signed with Georgia State, Austin McGee. By the way, Georgia State job just came open, which I'm very interested in because I think that's a good job in the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
Sean Elliott left to go to be the tight end coach, run coordinator at South Carolina. Just broke right before we came home. So, but Austin was a prospect, his son. So Dale McGee was there, and I remember standing there beside a couple people between Dale and I, Coach McGee, and this running back. Man, I was watching him they were catching the ball, and man, he was fighting it. And I was like, oh, dude, this guy's got like hands like stone, man. And I hate to see that because I know those coaches see that. But, if you look at his tape, he was a hell of a high school running back. He was fast. He was big. But, man, his hands, it just kind of showed him that day, like, oh, man, he doesn't have – now, this kid wind up signing with an SEC school. I don't think he's played a ton yet, but – from the evaluation side, I like to see who these guys are and, what kind of skills they've got. And this is not the best Under Armour camp we've ever had, but it's still, to me, the best camps left because the majority of kids with, P5 offers come and compete against each other in a camp setting. Take it for what it's worth, but really like to see these guys camp and move around, and you get to see a lot. I like that they test, man. Come test, and some kids won't run Sunday, but if you're going to play at Georgia, if you're going to play at Alabama, if you're going to play at Ohio State, at some point you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to run a 40 or you're going to put a GPS vest on. They're going to get a game speed on you. So I think some kids get so, paranoid about that and so worried about that. It's not as bad as they think it is, but the people put in their head, man, if you go run a 4.6, you're done. And that's simply not the case, so, but interesting always. I'm sure to be in the indoor at Carrollton. It's amazing to me. You have 120-yard indoors. The place is insane. I just left Lowndes High School down in Valdosta, and they got 120-yard indoor. It's an incredible facility. So state of Georgia, man, shout out state of Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. And the guy that I am most interested to see is Jared Smith. He's from Alabama.
He was there last year. That's really his coming out party.
Yeah, it was a little bit, but obviously looks great on the hoof. He's real tall. He's real long. Kind of reminds me of KJ Henry from back in the day when, just looking at him. But, man, I've thought all year long, and I'm not ashamed to admit this, I'd tell Jared this. I think the sky's the limit for him. But I thought he was a little bit overrated because I thought he looked a little clumsy that day. I thought and listen, talking about a 15, 16-year-old being 6'5", 225 pounds, of course he's going to be a little bit clumsy. But I'm interested to see how much growing he has done from year to year because, Rusty, just as well as I do, a lot of times that sophomore to junior jump, that post-sophomore year to post-junior year jump, that rising senior look, man, these guys at 17, sometimes 18 years old, they turn into men a little bit more in that 1 year. And I'm really excited to see him. Georgia's recruiting him. Chidera Uzo-Duribe was in there to see his state championship game.
Now, he transferred. He transferred like mid-season, right? Didn't he go to? He went somewhere and went to. He went.
He's at Thompson now.
He went from Spain Park.
That's right. He did. You're right.
To Thompson, and yeah. So I'm interested to see him after a year, and Georgia's definitely involved there at edge.
It's crazy. It really seems like the state, we've talked about the state of Georgia being loaded. State of Alabama's pretty stocked too, man, with him and Zion Grady. And you mentioned Alvin Henderson, and they're Naeem Alford, who just committed to Ohio State here recently. And our Dukes was saying that What's Duke's first name? I'm sorry.
I'm lost.
The guy we just hired at On 3.
Dukes, Philip Dukes.
Philip Dukes. Gosh, I could not remember his. I can't want to call him Jamie Dukes, but I knew it wasn't Jamie Dukes.
Dukes, baby.
But Dukes just had a phenomenal interview with him and a great ad in adding Philip. He just had a great interview with Naeem Alford saying, "Hey, listen, I don't think Georgia's out of it. I think this one's not over. Georgia's going to continue to recruit him hard, just like they did KJ Bolden. But that state is loaded too. So you got 2 states down here. Florida's always loaded. I mean, what a concentration of talent in Florida, Georgia, Alabama. North Carolina's got some, boy dogs too. So it's this is going to be an interesting recruiting cycle, and I'm really excited to see all those guys. I'm a Zion Grady fan. I don't know if he's as freakish as Adam Anderson was as a prospect coming out of high school, but he's in that same kind of build, a little bit on the slimmer side, a lot of twitch, a lot of length. But I always love watching defensive linemen and edge guys in these settings, simply because, they're at a little bit of an advantage in these one-on-ones. But when you take the pads off, and this is where I like the way it looks. When you take the pads off, you can really get a look at kind of the twitch and the hand movement and the flexibility. They don't get to hide behind throwing a shoulder into somebody and bull rushing them. You don't get to bull rush in these settings.
Ankle stiffness.
Yeah.
That is something that I had to learn.
Yeah.
And listen, 5 million times more athlete than I ever even dreamed of being was Ray Drew. And 6'5", 250 pounds, and a great dude, and one of the most impressive kids you would ever meet. But I didn't know what ankle stiffness was. You know what I mean? I didn't know. And there were a couple of schools that were like, no way, that he's ankle stiff, can't bend. And I'm like, okay. And they were right. It didn't mean he could play a little bit of college football, but he wasn't a 5-star first-round draft pick. And, those are things you learn. I had to learn kind of how to look for things like that. And that was he was 2011. So that was 2010. And so, you have to look at that and kind of learn. And that was one of those things you can see. I remember watching back when you could go to camps, Rodney Garner, longtime defensive line coach. He loves to watch those kids run the hoop drill.
Yeah.
The hoop drill, man. And he'll throw those things out there and you see if you can bend and see if you got ankle flexibility. And I remember Rodney Garner having he was a first round with Sheldon. My God, I'm showing from East Side. He was a first round draft pick for the New Orleans Saints. Sheldon Rankins. I remember Rodney Garner was standing there and he watched Sheldon Rankins do the hoop drill. And he made him go back again. And I thought, what? I said, damn, that looked good to me. And Coach Garner gave him a breath, made him do it again. And he kind of shook his head and walked off. And he goes, that kid's good. He just needs some size, kind of mumbled it. And he did. He needed to grow. So he goes to Louisville and he grows. And the dude's still in the NFL. But even then, with Georgia not being on him, Rodney Garner saw that, like, that kid can move. He just needs to be a little bit bigger. And he wound up being a first rounder. And DGD podcast right here. Good guy here, our North Carolina connection, my Bojangles guy. Did y'all see the Kendra Harrison backboard a couple nights? Dude, I saw that dunk, and that dude tore that rim out of the backboard. And I didn't realize, I was like, oh, my goodness. Like, you don't see a high school kid, number one, look like that in a basketball uniform. But, dude, he absolutely tore the freaking rim out of the glass. It's crazy. I don't know how I'm old. Next thing I was thinking was, how do they get that repaired to finish a game? Like, how do they get everything down to replace it to do it? So
they rolled that one with sand in the back of it out there.
Dude,
just set it up.
I don't know, but man, that dude, if you hadn't seen that on 3, go look at that on 3 social media. And that kid just freaking tomahawk dunks that thing.
You were bringing up Ray Drew. I still have to always remind myself, because obviously he was a 5-star prospect. So much was expected, and there was so much around that recruitment. You're still talking about a guy that with what you're talking about, and this is why being 6'5", 260, 270 and athletic is still important, even if you've got some limitations.
Oh yeah.
Still talking about a guy who had a 6 sack, 8 tackle for a lost season at Georgia. You know, I mean,
he played good. It's just as a 5-star, you're projected to be all.
What separates you from being a good football player from being elite? It can be just being ankle stiff. And I always Joe Wyndon, who we had on the Bark After Dark, told me years ago, he's like, man, watch him get in the stance. If a guy can get in the stance and he can't put his heels on the ground, he's ankle stiff. That's how it is, and that's kind of how it works. But I always go back to, you start talking about camps. I always go back to Justin Jones. You remember him out of South Cobb, I believe it was.
I went to see him play one night.
Yeah,
Georgia almost went on him.
They should have gone on him. I'm not going to be. Listen, that was one of those. Hey, my kid's here, so I can be here.
Yep.
And Chris Wilson was at that camp, his 1-year stint at Georgia as a defensive line coach, and a guy I think the world of. You want to talk about one of my dudes, Chris Wilson, great guy. He was there, and Justin Wilson rolled out of the car about 30 minutes late for the camp. He had gotten the time wrong. And I had gotten to know him a little bit, and I was like, hey, I just walked him through the process. This was when I was at Rivals, and walked him through, and I was like, hey, man, we got to get you signed up. And I'm thinking, this guy looks good on the hoof, but, I don't think he's as good as these guys here, honestly. And I'm sitting there thinking that the whole time.
Were they on the intramural fields?
I think it was at McEachern.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
This was at McEachern, and this was a Rivals camp at McEachern.
Oh, got you.
So I walk him through that whole process. I get him in there, and we get him registered, and we get him in. And it's like, hey, man, you need to stretch out real quick. He goes, no, I'm good. I had to run, all the way across 2 parking lots to get over here. I was like, okay. Put him in there. And dude, he slapped some dude's hands out of the way so fast and got to the quarterback. Got to the dummy, and I was like, dang. Mm-hmm. He went again. He ended up winning MVP of that defensive camp. And I remember talking to Chris Wilson after that, and he was like, and I was like, man, did you see this kid? He's like, yeah. I was like, man, y'all are crazy if you don't offer him. Yep. Well, he goes to NC State, has a stellar career, 3rd round draft pick. He's about to go into his 7th season in the NFL. And I always think about him as like that. All right, you get to watch these guys, and when the pads aren't on, there's some stuff that you can see in terms of hand play, flexibility, twitch that you don't get to see when guys can just ram into another guy and use their power. And so that's one that I always point to. That was another camp where Isaiah Wynn was the offensive lineman MVP there. And I always tell the story about how he dominated everybody so bad there and ended up with a big scratch on his arm. Sometimes these guys get into each other. And you got a whole group of D linemen over there. Justin Jones, Lorenzo Carter, all of them are standing right there together. And one of the coaches asked us, man, you need to get something on there. He goes, I'm fine, man. One of these girls did that. And all of these D linemen standing over there, he's just wanting all the smoke. Isaiah Wynn's unbelievable.
But I saw Sheldon Rankins and Grady Jarrett both work out for Georgia.
I coached against Grady Jarrett.
Let me tell you something. And I'm not picking on Rodney Garner, because if I was the Georgia defensive line coach that day, I don't think I'd have offered either one of them because they weren't big enough then. You know what I mean? And kudos to Clemson and kudos to Louisville for taking a chance on those guys.
Yeah.
But both of them wind up being 1st rounders. Yeah. Grady Jarrett's one of the best defensive linemen.
Was Grady Jarrett a 1st rounder?
I can't remember if he was a 2nd or something, but he winds up being
a high pick, and he was worth a 1st round pick.
I can't remember. I know Sheldon was, but Grady Jarrett wound up being what?
Grady Jarrett was a 5th round pick.
I didn't know that, but
what a pick!
Yeah, no kidding there. And he wound up being, I think, one upon the number 2 highest paid defensive lineman in NFL, something like that. But I watched Georgia work them both out, and they both were like, I had seen them both because I had them in MVP camp. And I was like, I know these guys are going to be good today, but they're small, a little bit smaller. And it just goes to show, man, it's not, and I'll be honest with you too, the way Georgia is now, you have to have big bodies. Man. So I don't know that Georgia now would offer those guys because they just don't have a spot. You have to have a big 0 guy up front, and those 5 techniques are 6'5", 250, Mm-hmm.
There was a little run there with like Grady and these are different era guys, but the Grady Jarrett, Geno Atkins, Aaron Donald types that were right around 6'1", and there was a method, with which they played the 3 technique where it would kind of made it tough against these guards with their athleticism and their power and kind of being a little shorter but having some length. I know this, little Mike McDonald's story. With the Seahawks now, and congratulations to him. I remember we were in the film room before we played Rockdale, and Grady Jarrett was on the other team, and we coached both sides of the ball, and I had receivers, he had running backs, and we were talking as a staff. We're kind of like, hey, trying to nail things out. And I'm like, I think he was number 90 or 91 or something. Like 91, man, we're going to have to figure something out there. Like, and we were all in agreement with that. We got out of the game. We're like, man, I don't know if we could have paid enough attention to him. I remember Mike and I were walking off. I'll never forget it. And I said, we had already played Stephon Tuitt that year, who ended up going to Notre Dame and being a high pick in the NFL.
Monroe area.
I remember saying to Mike, I looked at him, I said, that is the best high school defensive lineman I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. He ruined us. I think we had like 40 yards of total offense. He ruined everything we did. Well,
shout out to this too, as I can get into the Falcons a little bit just for a second. But what Grady Jarrett does off the field,
dude,
you're talking about a superhuman, great guy. I've got a picture from my MVP camp in 2010 in Rome. I have to go back and look, but the award winners that day were Chris Conley, wide receiver, David Andrews, top offensive lineman, Grady Jarrett, top defensive lineman. Kenyon Drake was the top running back. I can't remember who the DB was, but we had, dude, it was like Amarlo Herrera was a junior linebacker. So we had like in this one, and I tell you who the quarterback was. It was a kid from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, named Chad Voitic, who wound up being a starting quarterback at Pittsburgh. And up there for the Panthers. And so, man, it was a crazy. I got that picture and I pull it out sometimes. Jordan Jenkins don't even have a shirt on. He probably weighs 195, man. It's the cotton shirt I bought him. Those things got ripped off in one-on-one drills. But David Andrews and Grady Jarrett must have did 30 reps that day. And I've recently caught up.
I love that. Those camps.
Well, I recently caught up with David Andrews. I recently basically had lunch with David Andrews, and because he's bought some property up in Northwest Georgia. We caught up for a few minutes, and he goes, "Man, you remember that camp?" I go, "David, I'll never forget it, man." He goes, "Dude, we're just kids. We didn't know what else to do. Just out there balling." And he said, "I've seen that picture. You posted a couple of times. It goes crazy." He goes, "You look at Grady and think, here he is, and you look at me with he had a little buzz cut, and he's now he's the captain of the New England Patriots still."
Yeah. Unbelievable. Great career for him.
Yep.
All right, Rusty, let's move on to this Georgia at Texas, and DawgsHQ will be there. I'm not going to miss the chance to go to Austin and have some fun. I've been to Austin before. It's a great time. But there's a football game going to be played, kind of like my first trip to the Masters after we went to the pro shop and got some egg salad sandwiches and all that stuff. Been there for 2 hours, and I looked over at the guy I went with. I said, "Hey, man, legend has it there's a golf course out here." Oh, there will be a game played at all that spectacle out there in Austin, Texas. What are you looking at? They lose a lot, but they bring back a very important piece, which is that quarterback. What are you thinking about this one kind of going into it? Because they're going to be highly ranked.
They'd be grown man football. I don't really know how. First of all, you start talking about, you start looking at things, but obviously you start at quarterback with Ewers and Carson Beck, and knowing that it's going to be a high level game, and offensively, look at it. That has, not calling my shot, but that has like national championship potential. Like those are two teams that are built to play in Atlanta on January the 20th. So you have all the pieces, and it's kind of one of those games of who makes a mistake win. But man, I'm usually a guy, Jake, that can shut down things. Football hits me right after 4th of July, and SEC media days are coming, and you start getting your mind like, okay, here it comes. Like it's buckle up time. But I'm telling you, man, with the expanded playoffs, Georgia's schedule, opening up with Clemson, Like, I haven't been able to check out. Like, I haven't been able to think, like,
I'm so excited.
I mean, this is, you and I on this site together, and you start thinking about, damn, man, what a season, what a time. This is going to be, and we're not breaking news, and we're not, but you look at the 2024 schedule and these road games for Georgia and kind of what you and I know behind the scenes for 2025 for Georgia fans, man, it's going to be these next 24 months, man. There's going to be some big time games at some locations. You're at Ole Miss, you're at Alabama, you're at Texas. You got these home games coming up, new schedule. It's just going to be, I tell you, I talked about on the radio yesterday in Atlanta. I don't expect Georgia to, very well could, but I don't expect Georgia to be one of those teams hosting a playoff game in December. But could you imagine like Michigan at LSU in December? Or could you imagine LSU at Ohio State? Could you imagine LSU at Penn State in December?
Oh man.
Dude, could you imagine
all of those you just mentioned? I mean, Rusty, I look at it like this, like I obviously I care. Okay, I care if Georgia wins or loses. I'm not trying to say that I don't. I do. I'm a Georgia grad. We deal with a lot of Georgia fans all the time.
Our life's a lot easier.
Yeah, makes our lives a lot easier. And I care about a lot of these people. You know, I got a lot of friends that care about Georgia. My dad is one of the biggest Georgia fans you'll ever meet. I cover the team day to day. I have no problem sitting in that press conference and being calm as a cucumber if they're losing by 40 or winning by 40. So it's a job. It's professional, whatever. But all of that aside, no matter how they do against the schedule, I am so excited to see them play the schedule because I feel like, Rusty, and getting back to this Texas game, you look at these road games, by the time Carson Beck tees it up against Alabama at Alabama, he will have still played in hostile environments at Auburn and Tennessee. And I don't care what you say about how good those teams were last year. Those environments you learn a lot from that.
I've been all over. Let me tell you something. I don't care what their record is. When you go to the Plains, that's one of the loudest places.
You're in for it, man. I
don't care what their record is. When you go to Auburn, that place is, and the way they have that scoreboard with that way it closes it in, basically, it's different level there.
It's like being in the ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, you're never 100% safe. Like you can be in the shallow water, but you start to get out there thigh deep and stuff can start pulling you different directions at Auburn. Tennessee's a little bit of the same way, man. I watched Georgia go up, 24-3 in Knoxville with a pretty good defense. And that was the night Nick Chubb went down.
Yep.
They made some mistakes, but that ended up being a snake pit for them in that game. But going back to that, like Carson Beck will have that experience. He'll have had Alabama under his belt by the time he plays Texas. I'm so excited to see how Georgia reacts to this whole thing because I believe that you go through that trio of games at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. If you win 2 of 3 or by some craziness find a way to win 3 of 3, it says something about this program that is on the same level as but different than winning back-to-back national championships because that just lets you know kind of where this program and the thing I'm most excited about, and I know this is kind of turning into Georgia in 2024 thing, is, man, Kirby Smart doesn't have to go up to the podium this year at SEC Media Days and talk about embracing complacency. Because
he'll have some message.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to talk about that because they ain't coming off back-to-back titles. They're coming off disappointment, and you saw how they handled disappointment in the Orange Bowl. I was talking to a coach, like a big-time football coach yesterday, like a very well-known assistant coach. And has been a head coach. And he told me, he's like, man, listen, Georgia went into that game, the Orange Bowl. They didn't have Brock Bowers. He said they didn't have Amarius Mims or Christian Miller and started, naming off some names and said, and what happened? Georgia still overtook them. I know Florida State was missing disproportionately more, but 63-3 more. Georgia was motivated in that game. Georgia was ready. They were there to take care of business. They were motivated. And I expect to see that kind of Georgia in the 2024 season. Doesn't mean they're not going to lose a game. And the more I look at this Texas matchup and, you start thinking, well, Texas is probably going to be a top 5 team going into next year. Georgia's probably going to be number 1 going into next year. I can see why. Texas brings back a great quarterback. They bring back some key pieces. But lose 2 great wide receivers, lost a great safety. The Sweat kid that was so good for them up front this past year, it's the man child. He's gone.
Did you see what
I think Georgia does bring back a little more than Texas does.
Did you see what Bijan Robinson said about A.D. Mitchell?
I did not.
He said he thinks he could be the best wide receiver in the NFL.
Wow.
He said the dude. He said
I'm a big AD fan. Always have been. Fan of him as a player and fan as a person.
I think everybody understands when you make a decision over family. You have a small child in Texas, won 2 national championships at Georgia, and good luck to you. And of course, Georgia fans want to keep him. Georgia want to keep him, but kind of understand it. But Bijan Robinson, I saw it yesterday. He said that he interviewed at the Super Bowl. He said, I think A.D. Mitchell is going to be impressive at the combine. I'm interested in what he runs. Yeah. I don't have any concerns, but he could really put himself. Xavier Worthy is going to be a first-round draft pick, probably. But you look at A.D. Mitchell, and I'm very interested in what he can end up. Saw a tweet of something yesterday, one of the touchdowns for Georgia, and they went against Ohio State. They went Brock Bowers, A.D. Mitchell, Ladd McConkey on a trip set. And, you kind of take that for granted. You're sitting there thinking, and Oscar Delp was the H-back on the other side, a little freshman. You know what I mean? So you look at things like that and kind of realize what Georgia was bringing to the table in games like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, well, you talked about the Super Bowl. It's not going to quite be in Carrollton this week what it was in Vegas, with all this media descending upon Carrollton, Georgia to party and have a good time. But it'll be close to it, Rusty.
I got some new gear for you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there we go.
What do you think about that?
I like them. I like them a lot.
You think we can give a few of those away on here?
Yeah, let's give some away.
I got some red ones coming, and when we start giving these things away on the pod here, you will thank me because I don't cheap it on the. You get a shirt that won't shrink. It won't shrink, and so I'm a stickler for that. So got some new gear coming, and we're gonna have some stuff. We're either in Texas or maybe even Ole Miss. We're gonna do a little road get together.
Mm-hmm.
And DGD. We don't do white around here. Me and Jake have way too much barbecue in our life.
Yeah,
we don't do white.
Between the barbecue and the siracha, can't have it around me. Just
don't do white.
Anything. I'll drop anything. I'll spill anything on myself. Coffee, it don't matter. Dip, spit, anything will fall on me.
I have probably bought owning camps for 13 years. I would say I've brought 15,000 t-shirts, and I'm telling you right now, it took me 100 different orders. God bless my supplier. But I have finally found the brand, and I'm not giving it away, but I have found the one that won't shrink, and it's moisture wicking and it's comfortable. So when you get a DawgsHQ shirt, you're going to like it.
There's something about shopping with a big fella. A guy that got some meat on his bones. You got to figure some stuff out when you're.
Look, somebody in the comments asked me if I was sick. I mean, I lost 20 pounds. I've been doing right this for a while now, and I'm not sick. I look sick, but I'm losing it by choice. So don't tell Bojangles going to hurt their stock. But I'm eating a little healthier. So, but no, not sick. I'm a little bit thinner, but I'm trying to get there. But I thought it was funny. Like somebody said in the YouTube comments, they were like, "Is Rusty sick?" I'm like, "Nah, dude. I kind of laughed, but I'm old. I'm old as hell, but not sick."
All right, taking the time to let you know right now there will not be a Sunday show because of the fact that we're, the whole staff's going to be over in Carrollton for most of the day that day and then traveling home, stuff like that. We're not planning on doing a show on Sunday, but we will be back with you.
Why don't we add one Monday?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Probably come back to you Monday morning.
Monday review. President's Day, everybody's off. We can have coffee with you.
Probably be back with you Monday morning, then again Tuesday and Thursday of next week. No Bark After Dark next week until I'm telling you, we've got some guests coming in March that are going to be a lot of fun. Had some conversations on that yesterday. But for this episode of the Georgia Show, I'm Jake Rowe. He's Rusty Mansell, and I hope y'all have a great weekend.